Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and today I am continuing the Bad Teachers State-Specific series. Now this week, we're going to Kentucky, but before we do, I want to shout out my newest Patreon global celebrity member, Miss Sarah Boudreaux. Now, Sarah is not far as a location from where I'm recording right now, just 45 minutes or so in Laplace, Louisiana. And y'all know I love my fun facts. So here's one about Laplace. It is officially the andouille capital of the world. It was proclaimed that in the 1970s by then Governor Edwin Edwards, which for my non-Cajun listeners, andouille is a spicy smoked sausage, and it's typically a staple that we will put in our gumbos here in South Louisiana. So thank you so much, Sarah, for your support of the show. I truly appreciate it. I mean that. Listeners, you can learn more about supporting the show by checking us out on Patreon at patreon.com/exposedpodcastfiles. We put everything from early release episodes that are commercial free. We also do bonus episodes. We even do quarterly gifts for our top tier Patreon members. And it is the only place that you can get the video version of Crime Wire Weekly, as well as Crime Wire Weekly Overtime. So go check it out. I promise you, your bang will be worth your buck on that. But back to it, as I said, we're going to go to Kentucky this week, and the first bad teacher I'm going to cover today was recommended by listener Lauren. So thank you, listener Lauren, for bringing Sydnee Graf to my attention. Now, according to Sydnee's X profile, she is a wife and mother of two perfect boys living her best life. We'll see about that. This particular case is very fresh and it's still in the courts. So everything I'm about to discuss, I have to say, legally, this is alleged. You're innocent until proven guilty. But here's the story I have. A little about Sydnee. She was 36 years old at the time of her arrest and a fifth grade teacher at Smyrna Elementary School. This is in Louisville, Kentucky. So on December 15th of 2025, just a few months ago, she was arrested for having sexually explicit conversations with a male fifth grade student under the age of 12. Which in and of itself is absolutely sickening. But it got even worse when in January of 2026, those charges were upgraded. So let's get into it. Due to how new that this case is, there's not a ton of information out there on Sydnee's background. But what we do know is that she was born and raised in the Louisville, Kentucky area. And look, thanks to court records, we were able to find out that in 2008, she was convicted of a DUI. That was at the young age of 19. And she was able to overcome this early stumble in life. And at some point prior to 2015, she completes her education, complete with a college degree. And she started teaching. Now, I'm not sure if she was teaching at Smyrna Elementary at that point in time or not, but she was definitely teaching. In May of 2015, she gets married. And then things kind of fall off in her background, and they pick up again in 2019 when she gets pretty active on social media as an anti-Trump supporter. And I bring this up only because in response to a tweet from Hillary Clinton that was criticizing Trump for some comments Trump made regarding John McCain, she retweeted that post with the comment, quote, "Not you, pedophile," which, as you're about to discover, was pretty rich considering what she was about to get arrested for in the future. Now, at this point in time, when she was sending those tweets, Sydnee had two toddlers. And by 2024, she was the fourth grade teacher at Smyrna Elementary School. And she was, by all accounts, the type of teacher you would want for your fourth grader. She was very active on social media, fundraising for school supplies, etc. for her classroom, and would describe her students as some of the brightest, most kind-hearted students she had ever had the pleasure of teaching. During the 2024-2025 school year, as a matter of fact, she would transition into the role of fifth grade math teacher at that school. So to tell you what happened with this bad teacher, I need to discuss quickly with you what an NTI day is. And simply put, this is an acronym for non-traditional instruction. Basically, this is a day where, due to snowy weather, for example, students would have to have remote learning with the teacher to avoid getting out in that snowy weather. And it was on a non-traditional instruction day that trouble with this bad teacher would start. So according to the arrest report, someone, and it doesn't specify who, reported to the school that during one of these NTI days, Sydnee had sexually explicit conversations with a fifth grade student. So the school contacts police, as they have to do as mandated reporters, and police start investigating. And they managed to get screenshots and even videos of the conversations. Once all of this evidence is gathered, on December 15th of 2025, they arrest Graf. And get this, when this sick individual is arrested, she is actually on the way to this fifth grader's house to pick him up, allegedly for a rendezvous. So police bring her to the station, and she admits to having these explicit conversations. And not only that, but a search of her vehicle uncovers drugs, including hydrocodone and Adderall. So consider this your warning, because I'm going to go into detail with what we know was said in these conversations that took place. And it's really graphic. It's going to shock the shit out of you. So if that upsets you, turn off the podcast now. But if you want all the details, regardless of how graphic they can be, here they are. Now, it's important to note that while the initial conversations would take place on an NTI day, it doesn't mean she was dumb enough to have them like in a learning room on Zoom or something with a bunch of students in the room while she's saying stuff to one particular student. In fact, my sources say the explicit stuff took place on Snapchat. And those chats included discussions about Sydnee Graf wanting to have oral sex with this fifth grader, and even going so far as to say, and I'm quoting this, y'all, quote, "I really need to taste that dick, FR, which is short for real, for real. Also in that chat, that's where her and this fifth grader start discussing meeting up. So she gets arrested for having those sexually explicit conversations, as well as those drugs in her car. And on December 16th of 2025, the very next day, she gets arraigned. And I actually have a clip of that. It's only about 6 minutes in length, but it's very interesting if you don't know how these arraignments work. So here's that clip.
Before we address your case, I want to make sure you understand your constitutional rights. First of all, the right to remain silent. You don't have to talk to anybody today. This gentleman's with the PD's office, Public Defender's office. He's here to help you if you have any questions. We're going to enter a plea, most likely of not guilty. Figure out your next court date, figure out your attorney situation. You do have felony charges, so you have a right to a preliminary hearing before a judge to determine if that crime was committed and committed by you. If you remain in custody, that hearing has to be held within 10 days of today, your arraignment. If you get out of custody, it has to be held within 20 days of your arraignment. On down the road, you have the right to a trial and a right to appeal. But for today, we're going to enter that not guilty plea, figure out if you want to hire your own attorney, if you qualify for a public defender, figure out your bond, and figure out your next court date. Okay? Okay, hang on one second. You are charged with procuring or promoting use of a minor by electronic means. It's a C felony. I'm going to enter a plea of not guilty to that charge. Right now, the bond is $100,000 full cash to HIP if posted with no social media. And you say you want to hire your own attorney. Okay.
Judge, I apologize.
Okay.
I believe this is Graf. Is that correct, Judge?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to enter an appearance in the case at this point in time, at least for the purposes of arraignment only, with the court's permission.
Okay.
Okay. Sydnee, I'm going to enter a plea for you. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Judge, we're going to admit her identity, waive formal reading of the charges, reserve the right to file any appropriate motions at a later time, and enter a plea of not guilty.
All right. We'll enter that plea of not guilty. Note you, at least for today's purposes, Mr. Miller, the bond is $100,000 full cash to HIP if posted. She is a low one.
Could we address the bond issue, Judge?
Of course.
She's been a long-time resident here, Judge, her entire life. She owns property here in town. She has 2 children here in town. She's married. She has her family, her sister, and while her years of flight risk, she is not. She has one charge back about 2006 or 8, a traffic violation. That's the only charge that I know of that she had that represented her back then. So that's the only charge I know at this point. I realize that the charges are serious, but $100,000, Judge, is the question she could not possibly make that. I would suggest, if at all possible, 10%. A lesser amount or that amount.
All right, Ms. Southern.
Your Honor, based on the nature of the allegations, the county would strongly object to a bond reduction at this juncture. We are asking for there to be a written no contact order, and that would be no contact with the juvenile victim, no contact with the place of violation, no contact with any minor children, no social media or electronic devices, and no contact with any JCPS property. Our position, as I said, is that given the facts and circumstances as set forth in the uniform citation, that this bond is completely appropriate, and we're not disagreeing with Mr. Miller that her prior record consists of a 2008 DUI, but nonetheless, these allegations are extremely serious. There are allegations of certainly contact.
I apologize, was I not correct that the traffic violation was like in 2006 or 8? It's like 15 or 20 years old, 15 years old.
I said I agreed with you.
Oh, I apologize.
Yes.
I didn't understand.
That I said I agreed that there was a 2008 DUI, yes.
I'm sorry.
The allegations here are certainly extremely serious, extremely concerning, related to the alleged contact with the juvenile in question, and then certainly of additional concern are the allegations that there were then not just contact that was electronic in nature, but then arrangements being made to meet the juvenile, and looks like there were actual attempts of picking up that juvenile from his residence, which is where the citation indicates that that's where she was apprehended. So as I said, our position is that this bond is appropriate and should not be changed in any way.
All right, Ms. Graf, I am going to leave the bond where it is, $100,000 full cash to HIP with no social media and absolutely no contact with the victim in this case. No messages through a third party, no email, snail mail, nothing like that. All right?
Judge, could I ask, can we, the ability to post real property, Judge?
No.
Cash only. Correct, Judge?
Correct. I never do real property.
So you heard the public defender there attempt to get the judge to lower that bond, but no dice on that, and the judge held that bond. But it didn't matter. She made the bond anyway. And it's cash only, y'all, meaning she had to drop 10 grand to get released. So when these people are arrested, The investigation doesn't stop at that point. It's still going on, and by the time Sydnee Graf is indicted by a grand jury, more evidence of even worse crimes are discovered. As a matter of fact, the police discovered enough evidence, though the specifics are not available, to actually add charges, including first-degree rape of a victim under 12, first-degree sodomy of a victim under 12, and unlawful transaction with a minor under 16, as well as additional drug charges. And I want to clear this up quickly. Sodomy can include anal sex or oral sex. And a lot of people ask me, does that mean they had anal sex with the victim? No, not necessarily. In 99% of the cases, sodomy as it relates to a victim under 12, especially when it's a female teacher and a male student, it usually means oral sex. Either the student gave the teacher oral sex or vice versa, or and sometimes both. So I just wanted to clear that up. So she's taken into custody again because remember, she was out on bond. And this time she's unable to post bond because it had been raised up to $500,000. And that's a cash bond. She didn't have $500K cash. And as of this recording, she remains in jail. Now, as far as the time she is facing for the first degree rape alone, she's looking at 20 years to 50 years. Same with the sodomy charges. She's also looking at 10 to 20 years with that transaction of a minor charge. So she could end up spending the vast majority of the rest of her life in prison over this. Just disgusting. Under 12 years old. So let's move on to our next bad teacher, also referred by listener Lauren, and that is Elena Bardin of Adair County, Kentucky. And this case is a different one because Elena, she was a 27-year-old English teacher who taught at the Adair County Detention Center. And she not only was convicted of multiple instances of engaging in sexual contact with a 17-year-old inmate, but she was also charged with soliciting a 17-year-old inmate to kill her 49-year-old husband. She was 27. So buckle your seatbelts for this one. And I'll start out by telling you Elena was born in 1997. Not a lot of publicly available information out there regarding her background. But prior to 2020, she does get married to her husband. And as I said, he was 2 decades her senior. And that's a big age gap. Also in 2020, she starts working in the Adair County schools as an English teacher. Now by 2024, her career leads her to an even more unconventional path as she begins teaching at the Adair Youth Detention Center. Youth prison, basically. And she's teaching English to incarcerated teens, including the 17-year-old boy we're talking about today. Now, she was paying this particular teen a lot of attention, and it was noticed by other staff early on at that center. Elena and this boy just seemed to always be around each other. Other inmates were talking about this. Other staff was talking about this. So much so that her boss had to have a, as we would say here in the South, come to Jesus meeting with her and tell her she needed to get away from this 17-year-old. The staff at one point even transfers this teen to a different area of the detention center in an effort to rein this thing in. Now, all of this is going on while not only is this now 27-year-old married teacher cheating on her husband, but she also has a 5-year-old child. So on March 27th of 2025, prison staff was conducting a routine search of cells. And it was during said search that they uncover some pretty damning stuff in the cell of this particular 17-year-old. They find both letters and explicit pictures in the juvenile's bunk that were sent by Elena Bardin. And this was quite the stash, y'all. This wasn't one or two letters. How about 193 letters alone? They confiscate the letters, and at this point, the Kentucky State Police get called in and a full-scale investigation is started. Now, what police would uncover was pretty shocking. Those letters, pretty dirty stuff. Not, I love you, do you love me? More like 50 shades of gray dirty. There were writings back and forth referencing the teacher grabbing the teen's balls and playing with the teen's penis and things like that, and even some references to the teen killing Elena's husband. Yep, you heard that right. Now, to be fair, and I'll discuss it in a few minutes, it was a reach, that charge for soliciting a teen to murder her husband. But we'll get into that. Police do arrest Elena Bardin on April 2nd of 2025 for first-degree sexual abuse, distributing obscene material to a minor, which for the nude pictures that they found also in this kid's bunk. And as I told you, solicitation to commit first-degree murder. So it's off to jail for this teacher. And it was not long after that, and not surprising, that her husband files for divorce. This is in May of 2025. What would you expect? Your wife has now been arrested for several different things, including trying to hire someone to kill you. And I want to offer my kudos to really everyone involved in this case, from the judge to the prosecution to the defense team. The speed in which this one made it to trial was something I don't come across very often. In fact, the sheer fact that this case went to trial is also something I rarely see. And you can bet that solicitation of murder had something to do with that. So what came out during this trial? Well, in regards to those 193 letters, many of them describing sexual fantasies Bardin had for this teen, and one in particular even referenced the fact that Bardin was concerned about being labeled a pedophile and would urge the teen to hide the letters. And that's important because it's proof she knew what she was doing was wrong. You can't then come back and say, well, he was 17. I thought it was okay. Nope. You said it in the letters that he needed to hide them because you were concerned he may be labeled a pedophile. Now, in addition to that, they uncovered evidence in these letters of kissing and groping. And of course, as I told you, they uncovered nude pictures of Bardin that were found in his bunk. And these were actually, interestingly, developed at a local Walmart and then given to him. So these were physical pictures. Security footage was also shown to the jury of Elena Bardin entering his cell multiple times and staying there for extended periods. Now, there were some writings where Bardin would express concern of the fact that she did not want to, in her words, lose custody of her kids in a divorce, but that she was not happy and she wanted to leave the marriage. And here's a key quote in one of the letters. In one of those letters, she said, quote, "I know you say you'll take care of him, but shouldn't someone else do it to take suspicion away from you," unquote. Now, the student testified he thought Bardin was serious. However, Bardin said she was just joking about it. Now, she also kept a diary, and this is important to mention, where she would reference the teen getting rid of her husband. And if you were to look at the entire context of these letters, it could really go either way as to whether she was really wanting to plot to kill her husband or not. In the end, however, the jury did not buy that, and she was acquitted on the solicitation of murder charge. But she was found guilty of everything else. And I'm going to play for you now the actual clip where the judge hands down that sentence, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on this whole deal. So here's that.
I think I've received, 4 letters on Miss Bardin. Received a letter from her parents. Probably the best written letter I've ever received. mean, they're obviously very intelligent, articulate people. Received one from her husband. I received one from someone down at the jail, but involved with jail ministries. And then I received a fourth letter, the identity of which escapes me right now, but I read it. Anything you wish to say prior to the court imposing sentence? In this matter?
No, Your Honor. I think everything was, laid out in the letters as well as in the motions that we filed. I don't need to argue those, Judge. I think they're sufficient. Rely on the pleadings. Just we understand the jury's verdict. We understand what occurred in the case. We obviously the court sat through the trial. We still think there's certain issues with the case. Obviously, being an adult, being a minor, those type things. But the jury verdict was what it was, and we're prepared for the court's ruling, and we'll proceed however we need to.
Mr. Wright, how about on your end? Anything you wish to say prior to the court imposing sentence?
Just the only thing I would say, that there's no reason to rehash the facts of the case. I agree with Mr. Romines. The court heard that over the course of the trial. This is a case that a jury in the community in Adair County was able to hear. They certainly, I think, took the evidence and the instructions to heart and deliberated. And I would just ask the court to sentence Ms. Bardin in accordance with the jury's verdict that they rendered in the case. I think it was fairly tried. I think the court didn't comment. There was a clean trial, and I think the jury got it right. And I would ask the court to sentence her in accordance with their verdict, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Romines, anything else on behalf of Ms. Bardin?
No, Your Honor.
Anything you wish to say, Ms. Bardin?
No, Your Honor.
All right. This is a very unfortunate case. Needless to say, like I said, I was very impressed with the letters involving your parents. Let's start with the motion for a new trial and judgment of acquittal. I'm going to deny those motions. I think this was a clean trial. I really don't see any issues that came up at the trial that I think would be a concern from an appellate standpoint. I think the jury got the verdict right in this particular matter all the way around. And what we do, I've always said, and I believe that the juries get things right more than anybody else in our process. I absolutely believe that. And I think they got it right here. I really don't think you intended to try to solicit that young man to kill your husband. I don't think you did. I think the acquittal on that was the right decision by the jury. It's what I would have done if I had been sitting on the jury, if it had been tried in front of me. I think you were acquitted on various charges that you probably should have been acquitted on. And, of course, I directed a verdict on 2 of the counts because there wasn't any evidence, I thought, to warrant a conviction. You sent 193 pages of letters, I think it was, to this young man. One of them got you convicted. One letter. The one where you basically admitted to the sexual contact with this young man, which of course triggered the other charge in this particular case. That's what got you convicted, and the jury was right to convict you of it. Regarding the sentence on this particular matter, there have been situations, I think probably 4 times, when I've had trials and I have reduced the sentence that a jury recommended because I just thought it was very unreasonable what they had offered or what they had recommended the jury. I think I've done that 4 times in the many trials I've had, and I've considered that in your case. The thing that about this, Miss Bardin, it's not necessarily in my mind what I would have done if I'd been sitting on the jury. I don't think I would have done 14 had I been a juror, because you're going to pull right under 12 of that. These are 85% pro eligibility. The question that for me is that whether or not I think their recommendation was unreasonable to the point where I'm not going to follow it. Couple concerns I have about the case and about your conduct in this case. First of all, you were an educator. Okay, you were an educator of these kids. I mean, these are troubled kids. That's why they're there. I mean, you're there to set a better example. And the letters you sent, which, I mean, they were juicy. I mean, there were things you'd see in a XXX movie. completely inappropriate, obviously, and I think you know that for a young man of that age. And as an educator, it was incumbent upon you to set a better example. My biggest concern is the fact, though, Ms. Bardin, is that you were counseled to stop this, okay? We heard testimony from your supervisor, basically the supervising educator at the facility when you taught there, Brad Stevens. He pulled you into his office and said, hey, we're getting complaints. You're around this kid too much. You need to distance yourself from him. This is not a good look. You're going to get yourself in a spot here. I think that another witness, Jessica Black, testified that they actually moved this young man to another part of the building, another pod, so to speak, to try to get him away from you. And ma'am, not only did you not heed that advice and stop, it looks like to me you actually even doubled down on the behavior after that. And that's concerning. That's concerning. I know a lot of people in your letter talk about your mental health issues, that you've had issues with being bipolar, and I don't doubt any of that. I will say though, the 193 pages of letters, pictures, everything else, I mean, it depicts a very intelligent and articulate young woman who was clearly articulating her thoughts and desires to this kid. I don't doubt you have some issues, but it's just those issues aren't enough for me to not follow the jury recommendation in this particular case. I just don't find, even though it might not have been what I would have done if I were sitting on the jury, it probably would not have been. I don't find it an unreasonable recommendation, and so I'm going to follow it. So on the case, on the charge of sexual abuse first degree, I'm going to impose a sentence of 4 years. On the charge of unlawful transaction with a minor, illegal sex act, child under the age of 18, I'm going to impose a sentence of 10 years. Pursuant to the jury's recommendation, I'm going to run those sentences consecutive for a total of 14 years. I'm also going to sign an order requiring you to register as a sex offender as required by law for 20 years. I'm signing the interpersonal protective order that would prohibit you from having contact with this young man. I think that is for a period of 3 years, I think, but
Should be 10.
10 years, I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't really see that as being an issue, but you are under a court order to have no contact with him for that period of time. And obviously, I'm going to waive your fines and costs on this particular case based upon the sentence. Ma'am, I wish you the best. I truly do. Upon your release, it's going to be a while, but in the big scheme of things, when you are released, you're going to be a relatively young woman. You are. You have the rest of your life to live and spend time with your family and children, and I wish you well upon your release. Good luck. That'll conclude it.
So this is the first time you will ever hear me, and likely the only time, that a sentence may have been a little bit too stiff. And here's why. And I want you to throw out the whole kill my husband thing, because she was acquitted of that. The fact is, really, what it boils down to, she was passing love letters and some nude pictures back and forth to this 17-year-old. And she may have touched his dick a couple of times. They never had sex or anything like that. Now, do I think she should have done some jail time? Yeah. 2 to 4 years seems appropriate, but 14 years when just about every teacher that I've covered has had multiple instances of sex with multiple students a lot of the time, some of them 50, 60 times, and all they get is probation. This one just doesn't fit. It's almost on the extreme side of it. I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are. But there you have it. Another state down. In Kentucky, I'm giving you a C on the bad teachers consequence scale. One of them, I think, suffered really too much of a consequence. The other one, not enough, in my opinion. So there you have it. You get a C. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon, commercial-free early releases, bonus episodes. I do all kinds of stuff. Patreon.com/exposed podcast files. Also pictures of all the people I discuss, records, etc., files. Once again, patreon.com/exposed podcast files. And I want to tell my Patreon members, I can't tell you how much I love you for supporting what I do here on the show. I could not do it without you. And before I get out of here today, I do want to mention this. I have had a conglomerate of messages asking me about Epstein files and am I going to do an episode on Epstein? I'm not only doing an episode on Epstein, I'm doing an entire series on Epstein. It takes time, y'all. Hell, I got to go through 3 million files. And look, I read this shit. I don't just go off the hip. I read and gather facts. And that takes time, especially in this case. I can tell you that the first episode is going to start off with the Palm Beach arrest of Epstein way back in the day. And we're going to pick it up from there. And we're going to go all the way up to today. And I know it's interesting, as of today, actually, Hillary Clinton is right now, as I'm recording, testifying in Congress. But yes, I'm going to be issuing an entire series dedicated to the Epstein files. It's coming your way. I'm not exactly sure when that first episode is going to drop. It's still going to be a little bit, but I love it that y'all are interested in it. So am I. But that sucker will blow your mind. That will blow your mind when you're a storyteller, because number one, you want to get it all right. And number two, it is just so mind blowing. I can't even put it into words, but thank you for your interest, and that's coming your way. And until next time for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.